Hi guys, this is Souptik and I'll be trying to help you out with the MDA assignment, the cluster analysis one. So without further ado, I'll just share my screen and get to the assignment please. I hope you can see my screen. So essentially, Ashutosh sir has given us a data set on Nike, which was obtained by 45 respondents. Uh, the data collected was on variables like usage, gender, awareness, attitude, preference, intention, and loyalty towards Nike. The last five variables have been measured on a 7-point Likert scale. Remember this thing when we are doing the cluster analysis. Okay. So what is the task? We have to use the Likert scale questions to cluster the respondents. Seems like a very simple task. I assure you it isn't. Output. So these are the deliverables that we have. What could be the segmenting objective given the choice of segmenting variables, the data preparation, the iterations for cluster analysis, the solution, how many clusters do you suggest and why, profiling and recommendations, separately share the profiling sheet. So you need to do that part on an Excel. I suggest also making a Word doc and writing down a report on the basis of this because like that might be helpful. I don't know if that is part of the deliverables. Like we can ask some of the copos for that, but that might help you out there as well. Uh, for the purpose of this video, we'll be taking the first four questions essentially. And for the fifth one, you need to do an Excel sheet. I'll try and explain that in a separate video if possible. Otherwise, I'll just show you what are the profiling, like how you generally do profiling and recommendation. So we don't have the recording that Ashutosh said had done in class where he done the profiling and recommendations part. But whatever we could remember, uh, I'll try to make a separate video for that. If not, like the first four questions will definitely be answered by this video. So I'll have to stop sharing midway sometimes because like I have to switch between a lot of screens. So don't mind me. Yeah. So essentially, I have my data set open right in front of me. So here is the case number. Case number is the number of respondents. It should be till 45. Yeah, and there's user group, gender, awareness, attitude, preference, purchase, loyalty. And you can see the variable views and all. So, the one important thing to notice here is that the user group and gender, they are nominal variables, but the rest are on scale. So essentially a ratio or a interval scale. Okay. So another important thing to remember is what I mentioned there is we are doing this on a Likert scale. Okay. From awareness to loyalty, all of these we are doing on a 7-point Likert scale. Because of this, यहाँ पर you will have missing values. This is these values are 9. So there are 5 9s here, which essentially will come as missing values in the output because this is a 7-point Likert scale, and these values and these respondents have marked 9. So these are outliers essentially, or missing values or outliers, whatever you want to call them for the purpose of this cluster analysis. So essentially, how to deal with this situation where you have missing values or you have outliers? There are three methods that we generally use, and I suggest like some people. In this case, we can use two methods. I'll mention the three methods. So uh, the easiest method is to just discard this data, like discard these respondents or whoever are these respondents, you just delete them from the database, and then you do the then you do the cluster analysis. That can also be done. What else can be done is you can either floor the data, floating or sealing of the data can be done. So in this case, since the values are greater than 7, so the outliers are higher, higher than the permissible limit. So we will generally be using a ceiling, and the ceiling here will be 7 because 7 is the maximum value that these like the maximum value that you can get on the Likert scale that we've chosen. So all these nines will have to be converted into sevens before we start our process. Okay, otherwise you will have an error. It will show कि you will have a less number of iterations for your cluster analysis. So ideally, the number of iterations should be uh, 44 because there's 45 data points, and it should be 45 minus 1. It's always n minus 1 number of iterations that you get to create a. So the cluster analysis will happen, the number of iterations will happen till you have one cluster which comprises all the subclusters and all the different segments that's supposed to be there. Uh, so for that to happen, you need to have like n minus 1, which is in this case 45 minus 1, 44 iterations. But if you have missing values in this case, you will not have 44 iterations. You have to change this on data. Yes. So you find out the values which have 9. Mention them here. So you can see that they are in a diagonal form here. So that is how Sir has given it. So just manually change these values into 7 because we are doing a ceiling here. So I would suggest that some people try doing this, uh, some people tried actually deleting these fields, deleting this data, and then also doing it. You can also do it that way. Just the 5 data points will be deleted. That's all. You'll be having a 40 point data set, like for 40 data points in your data set. So some people also try that. Otherwise, like AD will have this idea that we've all copied, and that is one thing that you definitely don't want him to have an. So ठीक है, I've manually changed all these values into 7. They were on this diagonal as you can see. So this is basically what we've done in data preparation. We've understood that there were outliers and there were like missing values, and we have done the ceiling here. I have done a ceiling here. You can easily delete these fields, and could have easily done the cluster analysis on that basis. So after doing this, what I did was I went to analyze, I went to classify, and I did hierarchical cluster. So already here, because I've taken these things before, so like it's already done. But these are the 5 variables on the basis of which we are clustering. So I will take these are the Liger skills questions. So I'll take them into variables, and nothing essentially here. I'll go to statistics. Statistics may acclimation schedule will be ticked. Nothing else. Just take a look at this. None will be here. Continue. In plots, dendrogram should be ticked. Nothing else. All clusters and all. Yeah. Method may I prefer using the wards method, and this is the method that Sir used in class. So select the wards method here. The default setting must be between groups linkage, but please select the wards method. Wards method uses variance for uh, essentially clustering the data. So I think it's a far better way of clustering. And its squared Euclidean distance is perfect here. So like I'll go and continue from there. Save. For now, keep it at none. We'll see what happens later on. and after this you click on OK, and you will get a output. I will stop sharing screen and I'll share screen at the output. Yeah. Uh, Hopefully you can see. So earlier, if you had done the cluster analysis without any data preparation, the data preparation that we did was the ceiling in this case. So you would have missing values here. You would have 5, and it would have been 11.11%, because like 5 out of 45 would have been uh, missing. So that was there, but we've treated the data. We've done a ceiling. We've done a ceiling for the data, and we found these values out. So that's the case processing summary. After that, you'll have the acclimation schedule. I will just show you here that we have 44 iterations here to have the entire to make the entire data set into one cluster. So yeah, we will be finding out the number of clusters on the basis of this, and on the basis of uh, the dendrogram that is available here, dendrogram using word linkages. You can majorly see how many clusters you are going to have. The data set that AD did in class, it was very evident that there would be three data sets, three clusters. But here it's not so evident, so we might need to do some analysis before we get to that. So I hope you guys can get up to here. uh, this is essentially what you will be having as an output. So what I did right after this is I'll stop sharing screen. I'll open an Excel that I found there. Yep. So essentially what I've done here is this agglomeration table. I've just copied it from here, and I have pasted this on an Excel sheet. I hope you guys can see the Excel sheet here. Yeah. So that was the acclimation schedule, and I pasted it in my Excel sheet. So what does this essentially show us? It shows us in the first iteration what will happen is 40, the respondent number 40, wherever that is placed, that is the closest to the respondent number 44. Their coefficients are 0.5. So these two become a part of one cluster. Okay, they'll become part of one cluster. And then like 8 and 19, these respondents become part of one cluster. 4 and 18, this become part of one cluster. What does this next stage show? This next stage shows in which stage, this is number 10, where this cluster this cluster will now be defined as referred to as 40, because that's a cluster now. Where does that show up next? So you can see that 9 and 40. So 9 becomes part of this cluster that is represented by 40. So this is basically how the cluster analysis happens, like how the clustering happens. It like strongly suggest you to go through AD's videos if you don't understand this, because like if you understand this will go a long way in helping you write the report and understanding why we are taking the clusters as we are taking them. So after that, what we found here was there are 44 iterations, and that is correct. Basically, there should be 44 iterations for uh, making all 45 respondents into one clusters. And these are the coefficients. Essentially, in this case, since we are using words method, these are the variances. And what AD said in his class was there should be a stark difference in the variances for us to ensure, for us to say that this the respondent should be in a different cluster. Like how many clusters there are, there should be it should have like a stark difference. So what I've essentially found out here is the percentage change from in the coefficients from the previous one. So essentially you can see here, this is this value minus this value divided by this value, uh, and taken as a percentage. So for the first one, 100%, it's fine. Like we don't take it for the first one. It's going to be pretty high, the rate, the rate of change. But after that, if you see, there is not much of a drastic change till you come to this 12, 16, 25, 38, and 46. So I hope all of you guys have gotten up to this stage. Then you can get an idea from here that there can be a possibility of having four clusters, because there is a distinct difference between these, uh, like 12%, 16%, there's a difference. 16 to 25, there's a difference. 25 to 38, there's a difference. And 38 to 46, there's a difference. Don't go by the differences in the initial stages, because in the initial stages there will be high differences. But go forward towards the later stage, because in the later stage you will be clustering, you will have like distinct clusters developing. So it's high possibility that there is a possibility of having like four clusters or five clusters, depending on how you see it. So I'll just stop sharing screen here, and I'll show you the dendrogram, and you can make an assumption for yourself, like how many clusters do you want in this case. Uh, Let me know. Yeah, I think you'll be able to see my Word file here. So this is the dendrogram that I've copied from there. So here you can clearly see that this entire part can be taken as one cluster. This part can be taken as one cluster. This part can be taken as one cluster. You can either take this as a separate cluster and this as a separate cluster, or you can take this entire part as a cluster. Okay. So I'll this is like visually helpful, like uh for us to understand. So this entire part is one cluster. This is the entire cluster. Clearly can be broken down into three here, and it can be broken down further into five, you can four or five. So I just mentioned that you can take this as a cluster, this as a cluster, this as a cluster, and this entirety as a cluster, or you can take this as a separate cluster, this as a separate cluster. So that will give you an idea of like how many clusters do you want. So for our purposes, we had taken four clusters. Okay, so I'll go back to the data set, and I will this is an important part. Uh, so I will run the cluster analysis again, but this time I know how many clusters that I want, because I've done the dendrogram. I've seen the dendrogram, and I've done the analysis on Excel, the how much the coefficients are changing. The coefficients here being the variance, so how much it's changing, and I have an idea that four clusters can be a good measure. You can also do five clusters, depending on like what you want. So I'll go back to analyze. I will go to classify, and I will go to hierarchical clustering. Everything is here the same as it was. Just right now here, when I'm doing save, I know the number of clusters that I want. I'll just type in four clusters, because like for the benefit of whatever I've seen here, I think four clusters is a good number to take. Uh, it's it's pretty evident that you can take either four or five clusters. I'm taking four clusters. Okay, so Now click on OK. Okay, this part I'll delete, cluster part, and uh, so after running the output again, what it shows is it will show the same values here again, that the number of clusters in the agglomeration schedule. After that, same dendrogram, all the same things will be shown. What will be different here is if you, sorry, I did not share the output screen. Yeah, I hope you can see the output. It's going to be the same output as there was in the previous case. But what will be different here is when I go back to here, what will be different here is you will have a column here which is going to be dividing it into the number of clusters. It's going to be like how many, like which respondent is in which cluster. That is how it's going to be here. So you can clearly see. So I've taken these values, I've copied this entire thing, and I pasted it on an Excel. Show you the Excel. Huh. So this is like this is 5 clusters. I'll show you for 4 clusters. So 4 clusters I've pasted it here, and essentially in cluster one there are 15, in cluster two there are 11, in cluster three there are 10, and in cluster four there are 9. So what AD said that there should not be any cluster which has like a disproportionately low amount of respondents, and there should not be any cluster which has a disproportionately high amount of respondents. And in this case, it more or less looks uh, accurate. So yeah, I hope you guys can see this screen, and I hope you can appreciate that once we're doing it with 4 clusters, uh, like it it gives a reasonable result. So once you're done with that, we'll have to go back to the data set again. So we've done all of these things right now. We found out the clusters to which the number of clusters, the number of iterations, and the cluster to which each respondent belongs to. Now what we need to do is for basic profiling, you and for the end of segmentation to happen, you need to name each of these segments, the 4 segments that you made, the 4 clusters being the 4 segments. Uh, each of the segments you have to give a name, like on the basis of like on the basis of the variables that we've taken to cluster them, and the values that they have. What are uh, what can each cluster be called? So for that you have to go back to analyze, you have to go to tables and create custom tables. uh, Here all of these values you take it on the row, and you will take word method this part on the column. Yeah, I suggest using a mouse for this because it's taking some time for me as well. Hmm. हाँ ठीक है, अभी this should be fine. Position columns, everything, and I'll click on OK, and I'll stop sharing this and go to the output, that the output that we have. And here you can see after everything, normally what was there is will be there, and after this into custom tables. Each cluster, you will have the mean values for each of these different variables. So for cluster one, you can see awareness is there's an average awareness of 6, average attitude towards Nike of 6, preference, just some minor spelling errors, yes, but please don't mind. Uh, this value is also 6, preference for Nike, purchase intention for Nike is 5, and loyalty for Nike is 5. Uh, from this you can say effectively that either you can say that these guys are Nike aficionados, like people who would buy Nike no matter what, and people who would endorse Nike, people who are enthusiastic about Nike. Just come up with a name for this segment. This is basically like you've done the segmentation, you come up with a name for the segment on the basis of these variables. So whatever you come up with, uh, that is like use your creative head and come up with a decent name. I would say like aficionados or something for group one makes sense. So for the second one, the awareness is low. The attitude towards Nike is low. The preference for Nike is relatively uh, medium, I guess. And the purchase intention for Nike is fine, and the loyalty for Nike is very high. So you figure out what do you want to call this cluster on the basis of that. So far, your entire problem that is based on clustering is done. Now, right now, it is a marketing problem. Like these are the values that you have. What are the names of each of the clusters that you are going to give based on the mean values that you have for each cluster? So that is essentially what is your output, uh, what your SPSS output is going to look like. And this covers essentially your number of iterations, which should be 44, and you can show this entirely here. It will cover your data preparation because we first did a sealing. I suggest some people still the try out by deleting those data points. It is a very valid method by also like you can delete those data points instead of just using a ceiling. uh, there's that, and there's the dendrogram and all, and then the custom table. So this will be your output essentially, whatever will be your SPSS output. Hopefully, I'll be looking to make a video on the profiling variables. So the two variables that we are left with, user group and gender, those will be essentially the profiling variables. You'll have to do the profiling on Excel. So it will take some time for that. I suggest you, if you can go through AD's videos, or if you can find some screenshots from his live session that he did, you'll get an idea about the profiling. We will be trying to make a separate video for profiling, but otherwise, this is the SPSS output that you have. The first four questions have been solved in this. Hopefully, you have understood this. Thank you so much. This has been Souptik, and yeah, cheers, guys.